Chris Chan for CoachPop.com and welcome to this month in video gaming history as we look back to December 1984. And first this month we have 1942, which Capcom released to arcades. This was, it was a top-down, vertically scrolling shooter, the likes of which we've seen a fair bit of by this point. Just last month we looked at Namco's conversion of Xevious to the Famicom. But 1942 was different. A lot of other shooters around this age were concerned with impending space doom and flying through space to shoot up aliens and whatnot. And this had a historical twist. Not exactly historically accurate, but by the little fighters picking away at giant bombers and boss airplanes here. But it, people were flying World War II airplanes in the sky in a bid to shoot up presumably Japanese airplanes. This game did well in Japan, which is strange. It followed up by 1943, Battle of Midway, and 1943 Kai, both of which kind of took this historical age and made it more ridiculous with machine guns and lasers and whatnot, and made it much more interesting. 1942 was a fairly pedestrian, vertically scrolling shooter. You could shoot, you could perform a little sort of loop-a-loop barrel roll thing that would evade enemy bullets, and that was about it. 43 brought in smart bombs, so this was kind of run-of-the-mill. But it was well designed and good fun, and certainly bright and colourful compared to the blackness of space that was prevalent in arcades at the time. The series would be resurrected later in the 2000s with 1942 Joint Strike appearing on Xbox Live Arcade, and the legacy of 1942, and probably more specifically 1943, was felt in a lot of video games. Most notably, perhaps not most notably, but my favourite at least, being Banshee on the Amiga. But a good fun start, or a good fun game to hit the arcades in December 1984. Yes, such cringe-worthy voice sampling means that it's Ghostbusters that comes next this month. This came to computers in December of 1984 and consoles all over the place in 1985 and onwards onto Nintendo platforms, Master System, even Atari 2600. It was Activision that had gotten the rights to Ghostbusters, producing the game a little bit later than the American cinema release, timed pretty much perfectly with the UK one though. And the development work for this was handed to David Crane, who early in the year had brought us Pitfall 2, and this was perhaps a little bit of a step down, widely regarded quite poorly, is this Ghostbusters adaptation, but it's not really that bad. It just takes an awful lot of, guesswork and thinking to get your head around. It was in many ways a fairly ambitious and complicated game and split itself into 4 parts. This is the Spectrum version we're looking here, where first of all you had to you had to buy and equip everything on your ghost-busting vehicle of choice before going around a top-down view of the map and investigating any buildings that seem suspicious. Once you find something that's flashing pink, then you have to drive to the place itself in a top-down viewpoint, although on the 2600 version and the Spectrum version, the view was so zoomed in on the car that this section was really pretty much irrelevant. Other versions of the game had you avoiding things as you were driving, but this is kind of meaningless. And once you get there, then you have to battle a ghost and get it caught in your trap without crossing the streams as I did, at which point you're kind of stuck. I couldn't get back to Ghostbusters HQ in the end anyway, and just sort of floated around. You have to do all this and trap enough ghosts to manage the PKE meter of the city, and when it got too high, then the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man would trample over everything. So at that point you would have to go to the Zool building on the map and endure a terribly designed minigame of climbing steps up to the roof of the building, which took forever, before engaging in battle with Zool himself at the end there. It wasn't a bad movie game. There were plenty of worse. Um, just as recently as a couple of years ago. This was not too long after E.T., of course, but not particularly fondly remembered today. Finally, this month, Night Law on the Spectrum by Ultimate, who would of course go on to become Rare. This was the third in a series that also had Saberwolf and Underworld in it, but by and far and away the best and the most ambitious of the three. This was the first Ultimate game to take an isometric approach, and later on all sorts of Ultimate games and Spectrum games in general would all take this isometric pseudo 3D approach to depicting themselves. It became a really, really popular design choice. And it's not really hard to see why. It was really technically gorgeous for the time and for the platform that it's on, considering it is on Spectrum, and moves surprisingly smoothly, if a little bit jerkily. The idea is here that you are a guy that's been afflicted with a werewolf's curse, and you have to gather enough objects in a castle to reverse that and be okay within 40 days in the game, otherwise you will become a werewolf forever. So the game it has a day and night cycle in it, and when it's nighttime, then you'll be walking around as a wolf, and in the daytime you transform into just a normal person. And there's some enemies that will attack you when you're a wolf, and some enemies that won't. So it's a little bit different for the time. It was reasonably simple to control, but it was pretty demanding. You had one row of keys that would rotate you in 3D space, one that would have you walk forward, and one that would have you jump. And you can pick up to 3 objects at any one time in order to either take them to the cauldron at one place in the castle and have you be cured, or to solve various other puzzles. The problem with it was the problem with a lot of isometric games, not just at the time, but always. It's really, really hard to judge distances, especially when the game's being pretty exacting, which it can be in terms of where you need to stand and not get hit by stuff. And some of the platforming was pretty frustrating. But this received immensely high review scores and just universal praise at the time, and really was something technically quite gorgeous, and an awful lot being squeezed out of the Spectrum. This was at a time just before the Famicom would make its way west as the NES, and Rare would go on to do an awful lot of contract work for LGN as one of their sort of unnamed, or sort of, well, they were named but never had their attention pointed towards them, on an awful lot of licensed gumph before finally being purchased by Nintendo and having their great run through the 1990s. But it was work like this that got them noticed, and many think probably the peak of Rare's work, even including GoldenEye and the like in the N64 age. So Night Law was a great way to wind up 1984. For more on what happened in video games in December 1984, December 1994, and 2004, check out our full This Month in Gaming History on kaijupop.com. Thanks for watching. Bye.